Hello everyone and welcome back to part 2 of the backs of the Thoth cards on this Thoth Thursday. We touched on, I feel like, a lot of information in part 1. Hopefully you go check it out. I will leave it in the cards for you. But we're going to jump start this really fast. Okay? I'm not really going to go into any kind of information that we touched on in the last video, as this is part 2, so we're going to go with the part 2 area of study in this. Again, I used Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot by Lon Milo Duquette in my research for this, the backs of the cards topic, okay? Pentagrams play, now I want to try to get to, I'm going to show a little of the book, okay? There we go. Just as a reference point, okay? We just see a pentagram here, and it has the elements, all 5 elements present in this, I guess, on the edges of this pentagram. They are present within each of the faces of the cubes. Now, here's the cube, this unfolded cube. Each of these squares represents an element, okay? Or even further corresponding to the suits of the tarot, like wands, air, cups, or swords, I'm sorry. Wands, swords, cups, discs. And then spirit is this white square face of the cube. I guess as a way to further explain the fact that just the major arcana, the trumps here, the keys, are not the only representation inside the symbol. It is that the whole of the tarot that is the point. These pentagrams right here, they hold the aces and the court cards of each suit. So therefore, the spirit of each suit would be the ace. And then, of course, what inside the court cards, yeah, here it is. I'm sorry. Where, like, the spirit of fire is the ace of the fire suit, which is the ace of wands in this case. Okay, so that's what I mean to say, is that each court card itself, it places on itself like being a queen. The queens are the water elements of those suits. So the water of fire would be the queen of wands. The watery aspect of the wands lies inside the queen. Those are beautiful correspondences to have on the court cards themselves, but as a way to kind of condense that information into a symbol, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn used the pentagram as a way of representing these cards. So therefore, it's the ace and the 4 courts of that respective suit, and each pentagram lays on top of all of these squares. Okay, all 4 of these squares, represented looking like this. If we turn the page here, we can see that kind of represented here. And it even says the ace, the knight, the queen, the prince, and the princess of wands is inside this pentagram on top of this red square right here. Furthering onto the rest of the suits and their squares, their respective squares, holds that another pentagram that encompasses the ace and the court cards of their respective suits. Now we get to the white square, this white square. It does not hold a pentagram. It holds, turn the page, it holds the microcosmic hexagram. Now, before I get into that, I want to touch back on the pentagrams themselves a little. Now, because the macrocosmic hexagram is macrocosm, that would mean and suggest that the pentagrams that lie on top of these suit squares on these faces of this cube, that is to represent the microcosm. It's just a clarifier. So we have micro represented in the suits, in each of the 4 suits. But as the 5th suit of spirit, which again is present in the aces, but if we looked at that element as a whole, that entirety of spirit element would represent the macrocosm. So it's represented in a different way. Not to mean that there is very much an as above, so below aspect here, but universally, the macro looks a little bit different. We find the micro inside the macro, but again, because of the entirety of the universe, the macrocosm in and of itself would look a little different symbolically speaking. Now the macrocosm hexagram, which sits here, is the 6-pointed star. Okay? It's not a pentagram, it's a 6-pointed star. Now what that looks like, if we really look, I hope that you can see this. Let me see. Right here, I'll zoom it in. I'll even leave probably a picture. That right there, inside the white square. Now what it is and what it looks like and all the symbolism that's inside of that hexagram is the sun is in the middle. And then each of the points of this 6-pointed star has 6 of the other ancient planets. Now, I think that what this is essentially doing is mixing the micro, which is the number 5, which is back to the 5-petaled star or 5-petaled rose, and back to the 5 points of the pentagram. It's mixing that, the magic and the microcosm, with the number 6, which is the number of spirit, also the macro. And it's mixing. It's like all of us are the sacred number of 11. And if you're familiar with that number, you know that there's inherently magical properties within that number as well. It's present in this white box here to represent the spirit element, the macrocosm, and as a way to tell us that it's a different symbol, only so that we can understand that there's a magic in the 5 of the micro, and there's a magic in the 6 of spirit, and that it's a unity. It's a symbol that further teaches us the importance of the union of the human and the divine. This union is what these mystics, or occultists, or whatever you want to call them, call the great work. This work that we put into our practice to find how to unify ourselves with the divine, how we can unify the micro and the macrocosm is the great work. So if you read that in the text of yours, then the great work is about the unification of human and divine. So, I guess we'll close this for a second. Now, on top of the squares, now we see that there's loads, there's 3 loads on each of the squares, right? They're actually not part of the cube, of course, because it's not needed to make the cube. These loads aren't needed to make, lobes are not needed to make the cube. They're there for a reason. They sit on top of each square of these, I guess, fundamental elements to further represent the universal elements, the 3 universal elements of mercury, sulfur, and salt. Now, these elements aren't like the microcosm elements. These are universal elements, like I just said. Inside this book, Duquette places a quote by Crowley that I want to kind of read, and I've written it down, so it may not be the exact quote, but it is inside this book if you have it. Sulfur is activity, energy, and desire. Mercury is fluidity, intelligence, and transmission. Salt is the vehicle of the 2 other forms of energy. Basically, all 3 are needed in this universal, in the universe. There's these 3 elements that are always present: mercury, salt, and sulfur. Each element occupies a different lobe in a different way, I guess, to indicate their ultimate balance. Okay, so say up here in the air suit and on the earth suit, Mercury dominates this middle lobe. But then the other ones, something else dominates. And it's because inside this microcosm, Mercury would prevail in the air suit and in the earth suit, as an example. But then in the fire, Mercury wouldn't dominate. So it's about the ultimate balance and where those elements, those universal elements, need to be in relation to the micro. These macro versus micro, I guess you could say. And I guess balance is needed because for the universal solvent to be present, ultimate balance is needed to make vitriol. And you can't get that without perfect balance, which is what alchemy is all about. These are alchemical symbols. And I guess on top of this, when I was doing some research and things, I thought about the cards, the actual trump cards that would represent Mercury, sulfur, and salt, and kind of meditated on them a little bit. And those cards, respectively, are the Magus card, the Empress card, and the Emperor card. Magus being Mercury, Empress being salt, the vehicle, which makes a lot of sense, and then the Emperor being sulfur. And you kind of use these trumps as a way to meditate on these universal elements and as a way in which they may react together and as a way in which they may stand alone and what they're doing in both. That's a way in which we can meditate on this universal concept of these elements and how they play a role in relation to the micro that is us, the microcosm that is us. So that's what I wanted to meditate on before making this video, and it's kind of helped to understand why that universal balance is needed, I guess you could say. So we're further unfurling here. We see these green spikes. I call them spikes. There's 12 of them. And we could even say that, that's one more than this, the magical number of 11 that's adding one, right? That's adding something magical, some kind of property onto that. That's what I always assumed, is that if we keep uncoiling this symbol, okay, then 12 would be the next step, like the obvious next step. But that's my, I guess you could say, microscopic way of looking at things. That is a limited view of how everything could be playing out. Now there's 4 large barbs, which is what Duquette calls them, barbs, that have the letter. We're going to open this book back up. I've got it dog-eared because, I'm hell with my books. I've got it dog-eared. But right here in this completed Hermetic Rose Cross, as it is so named in this figure, we see that each barb dons a letter and some symbols, some astrological symbols to be honest, that each of them hold the letters, not each of them, but they hold the letters, all of these barbs hold the letters INRI and the astrological symbols Virgo, Scorpio, Sun, Virgo. Now the 3 smaller ones, there's 3 small that don the letters LVX, and then 3 others that don the letters IAO. Now the letters INRI, which are on the large ones, are said to they could mean many things. Like Duquette, he mentions igno natura renovitur integra, which is all nature is restored by fire. It could mean that, or it could mean that INRI that adorns the crucifix, a crucifix that Jesus, the crucifixion with Jesus on it, it has INRI on the top as a way to name him. Okay, Jesus Nazarensis Rex Admiram. But it's basically naming him. That's his name that sits atop most crucifixes. So it could mean that. But Christian mystics wanted, I guess, to evolve that and not want it to name Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, they wanted to put a little bit more of a Gnostic spin on it. So these Christian mystics fought back against this religious interpretation of INRI and evolved it into the IAO, which is basically a story of Osiris and Isis and her killing him and things like that. It dawns a whole story. He tells the whole story in here, basically, of Isis and Osiris, and but really it's the amalgamation of what the Gnostics believed represented life, death, and rebirth. They are their representation of their supreme God, which is IAO, which is also the other letters. Now, LVX, which are the remaining letters that we haven't talked about, is basically just letter interpretation of the Latin word for light. So I think that this nods back to that pure light, that pure nothingness of Ein Sof and Ein, and Ein Sof Ein Sof and Ein. The emanation of light that is nothingness, that is pure pre-manifested light that's beyond Keter on the tree of life. That's what I think that this is nodding back to. This Latin word for light. Ultimately, this completed Hermetic Rose Cross is an unmeasurable symbol that tries to represent the whole of the micro and the macrocosm, whatever the initiate or just us plain tarot readers deem that to be. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about is all the rest of it. That doesn't include the Hermetic Rose Cross, okay? Which is this mushy, muddy colors of all of this. Now, upon meditating on this, okay, because I've scried with this, because like I said, I've used this as a scrying tool, I found out that these are just the four suits, pictorially speaking, okay? Now, it's mapped out in like this grid, but down all of these, so this line is the disc. The dots, like these golden dots, are the discs. Then right beside here are the swords, okay? So we start here at the discs. Then this olive color is the swords, and then there's another black color that is a chalice. Now this doesn't look like a cup. It's like a big chalice that has two handles on it. That's what's happening. And then this is the wand. Now this specific wand is the wand that we see in some of the Thoth cards that don the winged egg at the top. That's what this is. So it's not just a wand, like a stick, like Aaron's rod, which is what we see in the Rider-Waite-Smith system, are Aaron's rods. But inside of the Thoth tarot, they are very much staffs, like rods that hold the Hermetic Orphic egg, winged egg that's on top. That's what is in this like reddish color line here. And all of them represent something. Now, this is also the colors of Malkuth, which is the last Sephiroth, the 10th Sephiroth on the Tree of Life. And if you know anything about the Tree of Life, there are 4 colors present in that one Sephiroth, okay? And I wanted to read something out of this book that kind of explains Malkuth and its colorations. On the Hermetic Rose Cross, the Earth Pentagram, okay, because this is back in the Pentagram section of this chapter, which is not the point here, is pure white light, but the entire lower extremity of the cross upon which it sits is divided into 4 sections, just like Malkuth. Okay, this is exactly the coloration of Malkuth, and that's what I want you to pay attention to here. Is divided into 4 sections colored black, citrine, and citrine in this case is a mixture of the 3 primary colors, but with a predominance of yellow. So a citrine color is the 3 primary colors with a little bit more yellow in it. An olive color, which is the 3 primary colors with a predominance of blue. And then russet, which is this red color, which is the 3 primary colors with a predominance of red. All the colors have been mixed and remixed to form all aspects of creation until by virtue of their own vibratory weight, they settle to the very bottom of the cross, and in this case, the Tree of Life, as dark and polluted colors. And it says that the pentagram that seals them in pure white, which is the pentagram that sits on top of the disc square inside this Hermetic Rose Cross, is to say this mess may be the lowest of the low, but it has something that no other section of creation has except the highest high, which is a little bit of absolutely everything. It's an amalgamation of all the other Sephiroths in the Tree of Life. It's an amalgamation of all the rest of the suits. That's why when we kind of read in the Book of Thoth and any of the texts that relate to this tarot, don't really talk about the earth suit being like an actual element present. It's because in Hermetic's eyes, in these mystics' eyes, it really wasn't. It was an amalgamation, a mixture, a muddy mixture of air, water, and fire mixed together. And that's the colors that the backs of like this, behind this rosy cross is representing. So if this is the balance between the micro and the macrocosm and meditating all of that, the tarot, us as human beings, everything out in the universe as a whole, then behind here is just to further tell us that we may be the lowest of the low in terms of a microcosmic level. We have everything too. We have everything inside of us. That's why we're so muddy. That's why we're so imperfect. Is because we're the amalgamation of everything that the universe holds. We're a muddy mixture and nothing else has that. So that's why the behind this rosy cross is so important as well. Is for us to meditate and learn and expand on the knowledge that we are the muddy mess that is a mixture of everything. Okay. I hope that you liked part 2 of the backs of the Thoth cards. I hope that I was able to inspire you to get your Thoth deck out and, look and see what you can find in this symbol. Come back in a couple of Thursdays for some more Thoth love. Much love, people.